Chapter 2 is going to cover some of the primary biological changes we see during the period of adolescence and emerging adulthood. Of course, since our course focuses so much on adolescence, the best place to start in terms of biological development is with puberty. Lecture video 1 will focus specifically on defining puberty, while lecture video 2 will look at the impact of puberty. So to get started, of course, we are all familiar with puberty and the changes associated with this time of our life. But just to make sure we're all on the same page, puberty does not just involve one type of change. In fact, there are physiological and anatomical changes, as well as physical function changes that we see as the body prepares for sexual maturity. Those changes, of course, have an entirely different set of social and psychological changes as well. So we want to start by breaking down what exactly is happening during puberty inside of our bodies. The endocrine system, if you're unfamiliar with it, controls hormones in our body. Because of this, many of the changes we see while we're going through puberty can be traced back to the endocrine system. The endocrine system is a network of glands, as you can see outlined in this image, that use hormones to communicate with the body. This communication starts in the brain and tells the rest of the body what to do. We know that the endocrine system plays a big role in development and body functions, and again, uses these chemicals in order to cause those changes. So let's break down the endocrine system for just a second. We want to start by looking at the brain. Within the brain, there's a structure called the hypothalamus that controls the rest of the endocrine system. This brain structure is in charge of coordinating function between the other organs involved. The hypothalamus plays an important role in eating, drinking, and sexuality, as well as growth. When it's time to start puberty, which we'll talk about the causes of that in just a second, the hypothalamus actually increases production of some type of hormone called gonadotropin-releasing hormones, or GnRH. These hormones then move down the endocrine system and tell the rest of the body, hey, it's time to start producing more of this. We know that this increase in hormone production actually starts roughly 2 years prior to there being any observable changes in an adolescent's body. This can start as early as 8 years old. And this happens when the body reaches a certain level of body fat. The level of body fat in an individual's person is what cues the hypothalamus into the fact that we've reached the point where we need to start producing more of these hormones. Because of that, we sometimes see obese individuals going through puberty earlier than their colleagues or their peers. We don't quite have colleagues yet, do we? The next gland we want to focus on is the pituitary gland. This is also located near the brain and is in charge of releasing gonadotropins to the rest of the body. So the hypothalamus tells the pituitary gland, hey, it's time to start releasing these. The gonadotropins then stimulate the development of gametes located in the gonads, or our sex glands. Gonads consist of ovaries and testes, depending on the biological sex of an individual, and are in charge of producing estrogen and testosterone. These are probably hormones we are all familiar with. Both biologically male and female individuals will see an increase in estrogen and testosterone levels during puberty. Women, of course, see a larger increase in estrogen production than males, while males see a larger increase in testosterone production. But again, an increase in both of these, regardless of sex. And the increase of these hormones are actually what drives the physical changes that we see during this period. What actually happens during this changing period of hormone production is a change in something called the set point. Your body actually has an optimum level of sex hormones that it wants to be at. And when these gonadotropin-releasing hormones, when the estrogen and testosterone chemicals are increasing levels in our body, our set point changes. You can think of sex hormones working similarly to a thermostat. where you put the thermostat in your house on 70, and then when it gets slightly colder or slightly warmer, the thermostat kicks in and either cools or heats the house to keep it at this set point. Sex hormones work the same way, and your body is going to act in a way that helps keep it at that specific point. This works similarly to a feedback loop to maintain that level. And during puberty, that set point is going to increase, where our body now needs to be at a higher level of sex hormones. Again, this is all in preparation for sexual maturity or reproductive maturity. We know androgens, specifically testosterone, increase more in males, like I mentioned, while estrogen increases more in females. The set point for androgens, testosterone, and estrogen increases. Not only do we see an increase in sex hormones within our body, puberty also causes changes in our physical features. One of those changes is a rapid increase in height, what's actually the most rapid increase in height since the first year of our life. We call this the adolescent growth spurt, and many of you probably remember going through this during your early adolescent years. Like I mentioned, we grow quicker during the first few years of adolescence than we do at any point in our life other than that first year. We know that females actually tend to grow earlier than males, about 2 years earlier than males, roughly from 11 to 13, which is why you see women being significantly taller than their male peers during those first few teenage years. Males will, of course, catch up a few years later. We also know that there's trends within the body where an individual's feet, hands, and head will grow quicker than the rest of their body. This actually follows similar growth trends as the first year of life. From there, our arms and legs grow, and then our torso, chest, and shoulders. This is one reason why young adolescents can have that gangly look, long legs, big feet, where the rest of their body hasn't quite caught up with them yet. But of course, by the mid-teens, we are more proportional than the first few years of puberty. Some other physical growth trends that we see for males and females, the increase in testosterone that we experience during our set point transition causes an increase in muscle growth, again, for both males and females. However, males are going to see an even bigger increase in muscle growth than women. Males and females also both experience an increase in body fat, but in this case, males experience less of an increase than females. Males also experience a widening of their shoulders. Females, on the other hand, less muscle growth than males, but still an increase, a greater increase in body fat, and then, of course, a widening of the hips. Again, all of these physical changes are either involved in the preparation of the body to reach sexual maturity. Another change, physical change that we see during this transition are changes in primary sex characteristics. Primary sex characteristics are going to be sex organs that specifically produce eggs and sperm. As you can see in the diagram over here, these are going to include both the male and female reproductive organs. We also see a change in secondary sex characteristics, or body changes that also happen during puberty. That's going to include everything from increases in body hair to sweat gland production, oily skin, the lowering of the voice, and so on and so forth. One of the things we want to make sure we're focusing on while talking about primary sex characteristics is the production or beginning of release of the egg and sperm within the male and female reproductive system. In case you are unfamiliar, females are actually born with roughly 400,000 eggs, but many of those have already died by the time we reach puberty. At the onset of puberty, most females have roughly 80,000 eggs in their ovary. Once a female reaches menarche, or their first period, we see one egg maturing or releasing into the reproductive system roughly every 28 days. Over the next few decades, a woman will release about 400 ovum, or mature eggs. You can see how quickly the number of eggs a female has decreases over the lifespan. and how difficult it might be for some women to become pregnant because of that. I also want to point out that just because a woman has reached menarche does not mean that ovulation has begun. For a lot of women, that doesn't start until roughly the second year after menarche, and it can take up to 4 years for a female to what we call ovulate consistently throughout her cycle. Males, on the other hand, do not have any sperm at birth. They don't begin to produce sperm until puberty. We call the first production of sperm spermarche, and they can produce millions of sperm a day. For each ejaculation, men produce or release roughly 30 to 500 sperm. So you can see this vast difference in how male and female reproductive systems work. So why exactly is that? One theory is that males need to produce that quantity of sperm in order to actually maintain reproduction. The female body actually doesn't respond very positively to sperm. It can be sort of a hostile environment. An example of this is the immune response a woman's body often has to sperm entering the system. It treats it just as it treats any other invading substance and can actually attack sperm, which can make it hard to fertilize an egg. Sperm also has quite a long distance to travel in order to fertilize an egg. It has to work its way through the entire female reproductive system into the fallopian tubes. That's typically where fertilization occurs. So the more sperm a male produces, the better chances we have of fertilization actually occurring. So the amount of sperm that males produce is actually adaptive. It helps, survival of the species. The next thing I want to look at is the order of pubertal events. Like I mentioned, puberty actually starts much earlier, or around 2 years earlier than observable changes. This can begin anywhere between ages 7 and 13. This varies a lot by culture and, of course, by biological sex as well. Puberty can actually last anywhere between 1.5 years and 6 years, depending on the individual as well. And these trends tend to differ culture by culture. So take a second and pause the video. Take a look at this graph. You can notice a few things. First off, men and women, boys and girls, males and females have very different timing when it comes to producing primary and secondary sex characteristics. You can also see the large degree of variation in the timing at which each of these events occur. So your big takeaway here is, of course, the timing of puberty is a very individualistic thing. Every person differs. Differences can be caused by fat levels in the body, by culture, and even by stress in the environment, but primarily by genetics.